Welcome to Norma's Talk, and today I'm talking on the tarot, which shows the spiritual journey, and this is part one, because I'm not really sure how long, how many segments this will take. I haven't got it written out. I just talk to you as it comes. But first of all, besides saying welcome, I want to say last week, apparently I talked about how in reading the tarot, I don't use reversals, and that's how I was taught. And I said, oh, I'll tell you about that later, and I didn't. That was on me. So I want to tell you, first of all, before we go further, how come I don't use reversals in the symbology? And that's because I was taught not to. And why I was taught not to was because I was being trained to be a reader of cards. I was being trained to have my psychic muscle grow. And if you are looking at a card upward or backwards, very often what happens, you then come off the mental awareness of what you think that card is, rather than, as I was trained, what is the card saying to you? How is that card linking from one to the other? And I think I maybe forgot also to mention it has a lot to do with joining words. When we link symbols together, we use joining words, and, but, however, rather than, therefore, all of the joining words that are grammar words, we link that pathway, you may say, together. And I might have ignored that too. That's because I didn't have any notes about it. So but those two things really make a big difference, because I find if a symbol, I don't ever care where the symbols are in the deck, but when it comes up and it comes up back, I just turn it around, and I think energetically it tells you a little bit that this may have a different slant, but it always comes out, because what you're doing is that you're a storyteller. Card readers are storytellers. We tell stories. And it just happens those stories relate to your life. And because they relate to your life, and because there's so much philosophy in the symbology, which is what we're going to start looking at today, is that you begin, it's not just a matter of fact, well, this is how it is. It always tells you how to get out of how this is. And if it's good, it pats you on the back, says, keep going, this is great. If it's not so good, it says, well, you might want to consider doing this or that or the other. And the more you know the philosophy, the more you become aware of how they all interlink. And that's why they're called the Unbound Book of Wisdom, 78 pages that are interchanged. So you have myriad stories. I thought at one time I might write stories based on the symbology, but that never happened. So I still write, you might say, practical things that I know rather than created. I've read a few stories, but they're not the same for me. I'm just not a storyteller that way, I guess. Anyhow, let's get on today's topic. In my study, and this came a number of years later as I began to look at the overall journey and began to find the spiritual path, or the path that I was taking for sure, but also how it outlaid, like when they were putting this deck together, when Arthur Edward Waite and Pamela Coleman Smith, who was the artist, were putting this deck together. And by the way, they were members of the Golden Dawn Order in the UK, and which was known as a mystery school at the time, where a lot of other people studied, like Aleister Crowley was part of that for a while, I think. I don't know if forever. But anyway, Pamela Coleman Smith, which is a sad story because she died bankrupt with nothing, very poor, and she did all that artwork. And anyway, how they put it together, and it was they used their esoteric or their metaphysical knowledge to get these symbols, because up until their deck, which ended up becoming the Rider-Waite deck, but it was really a Waite deck, Pamela Coleman Smith was not really utilized until the women kind of said, hey, this really is Pamela Coleman's deck because she drew it. So that what they basically had there was their esoteric knowledge. And they really spelled out to us a journey. And you can begin to see as you put the symbols out. And usually when I'm teaching this, we take the first 7, because I began to look at this and I realized we've got 3 lots of 7 here. There's a similarity in the 7th card to the 14th card related to what is emblazoned on the chest. And so I began to take a look at how they began to fit together as a stepping stone, you might say. So the first symbol, and oh, by the way, I need to clarify something else, because I'll get an email saying, this is what happens. The first symbol I use is the Magician. A lot of people put the Fool first, but if you lay the symbology out, the Fool is walking away from the Magician. He's not walking towards the Magician. And it's only when you lay them all out in a big circle that the Fool, you can see that the Fool can in a way walk towards the Magician. So I've always started the people who studied with me off with the Magician. What I love about the Magician is basically he says everything is possible. How come is it possible? And the other thing that I find a lot of people forget with the Magician, because I gave it the key, all things are possible. They think as soon as they get it, oh, this is great. This is it. I've done. But there's one thing that every symbol in a way requires, and it's a little word called action. And the Magician in particular, he has all his tools laid out on a table before him. Now, all these tools are what we call the 4 decks of the Lower Arcana, Lower Secrets, Arcana meaning secret. And he has some symbology around him, but basically what's really important is below him, there are roses and lilies. Roses is desire, lilies are what they call pure thought. Above him is just roses. You aspire to what it is that you want. You reach up and you use the tools that you have, which in our world, the tarot world, is the wands, the cups, the swords, and the pentacles, depicting all areas of life. And I realized I got myself a little sidetracked there because I don't have notes about this, is that what Pamela Coleman Smith and Arthur Edward Waite did, they drew pictures for the Lower Arcana. Before that, you would have just got, say, 3 wands or 5 swords, no picture. They actually took it and made it philosophical. They actually opened up reading tarot for the masses, for sure, because now you have that ability to do it. And over the years, there's hundreds and hundreds of other tarot card decks that have been made, really. I was collecting them for a while when I first started, and I just quit because it just became so massive. And what I found is that they got away from the philosophical side. I found a lot of the tarot decks got away from the philosophical side and ended up being more, again, on the mental element. And I think we need the philosophy. We need to have things to support us and be aware of us. So anyway, let me go back to my Magician. My Magician has a wand in his right hand holding up. Left hand is looking down. Now, that wand is basically a spark. Again, a magician uses a wand traditionally. Today on other shows, they don't necessarily use a wand, but traditionally they always used a wand. And he is creating his magic here, but he's aspiring to that. Now, we cannot aspire to anything unless we do the action. Now, if we are looking at this symbol as a spiritual step, as a philosophical step, what it says is that you become aware that there is a power available to you, that there is a power above you, there is a power that is more, and that you can aspire to that power and utilize that power in your life. And that is the first step, is the awareness that, oh, there is something. We may not know what that something is when we start, but we know that it is there. And so, and then what that steps into is the second symbol, which is the High Priestess. Totally different looking. High Priestess has a curtain behind her, and there's 2 pillars with a B and a J on them, which is if you're going into biblical elements, Boaz and Jachin. Behind her is a river. but you can't really see the river really, really well. It's not really clear. And excuse me just a sec here. And I gave this symbol the title choice. Do we choose to go one way or do we choose to go the other way in life? Whenever that comes up, it means a decision needs to be made. And very often many other symbols that talk about decisions also is in the reading, because we don't always want to make a decision because it means we have to be responsible. But as a spiritual journey, when we become aware that there is a force available to us, there's energy available to us, we have to choose to go in and learn more about it. We have to choose to go into that river. We do not know how deep that river is. We do not know how fast it is moving. We know there's another side, but we don't know. And so in a way, already, we have to have a faith. I always say the fool walks back through the deck, and that every step has a little bit of faith. But we don't know. I didn't have our ultimate faith in the beginning, and I don't think most of us who set out on a spiritual journey or awareness have ultimate faith. We learn it on the way, yes, but not in the beginning. And we kind of, put our toe in, we may pull back. I was very, once I was skeptical. I was never really skeptical because my desire, which I have spoken about before, of knowing God and knowing that energy that people talked about was bigger than perhaps my fear of what that's going to entail. And so I made a choice. I made a choice to pursue. And for me, I was 20. I had a teacher who was teaching me how to read these cards and come to understand and work with them. Now, when you go in, and there's a level of commitment here, and when you've made your choice, there's a level of commitment. Now, I always found it interesting that the next symbol is the Empress, which represents the law of love. Love is everywhere in this symbol. It's on her, the Venus symbol is on her clothing. It's on her cushions, on the throne that she has on. She has a crown of stars. She has a necklace of pearls, which actually equal the amount of planets that they knew existed in 1910 when this was created. Of course, we know today there's more. She sits on wheat, ready to be harvested. And in the background, there is the river is pouring down like a waterfall to feed the wheat. How often water has been used to represent this force? And that's where, actually, I'll just say this now because I'll talk about it again, is that I have really come to understand that emotions, which are so important for us, because that's, to me, how our body talks to us, needs to flow. And when we block, when we don't want to deal with our feelings, it doesn't flow. And learning how to feel and be aware and the knowingness of that lovingness, that is the big journey all the way along. And I remember, it took me a long time to actually feel the universal love energy, because I'm one of those that put the toe in and take the toe out, feel the temperature, then withdraw, then go in a little bit further and come back. And I really wasn't aware, because it wasn't really spelled out to me, that that's what we were looking for. It was many years later when I actually ran into the energy full bore. But I came to understand that when we go, and it's true, I began to take a look at life differently when I realized the importance of universal love, the importance of my love to my family, my children, people around me. And it was a whole awareness of growth and enjoyment of life, and how when life is like, I love summer, I love the heat. I come from a country that's hot and has hot summers, and when I was a kid anyway, and sometimes hot now, but sometimes not so hot, like all our weather's changing because our planet is moving. But I like the heat, and when the heat comes, I'm creative. And that is the Empress. The Empress is creativity, fertility. It is just full blown. Now, so we learned that this energy that we've committed that we're going to go look after is there for us consistently, always there. But the next symbol is the Emperor. And if you had a deck of cards and you were laying these out, you got the delightfulness of the Empress, and then you come to this dour person of the Emperor. What is he doing sitting there? Now, what happens a lot with us on our spiritual path is we run into doubt. We run into cynicism. Usually what happens when we're learning something, we want to share it with those around us. And this is when all the people come out and go, oh, what are you doing? And creating, and your own fears, your own uncertainties, your own awareness begins to come in. And if you look at the Emperor, is that he's set. Now, he has a lot of symbology around Mars. Now, Mars is supposed to be the god of war. It is supposed to be action. This guy isn't moving. And I often explain to people, as I've gotten older, I really understand it, because he's got a white beard. He's well shielded, that's for sure. But in his hand, one hand he has an orb, which is the orb, and one hand he has a sword. Now you try and get up out of a chair when you're older with your hands full. You can't do it most of the time. You have to bend way forward. You have to readjust your body. You have to, and I find I always have to put something down and then kind of hold myself up, because I have back issues thanks to all my sports activities as a youngster and falls I took and many other things. And when you get older, those things kind of come up a little bit. And maybe people tell me, you know, they just keep running energy and you're fine. I probably have a little bit of the Emperor in me. And so I kind of stiffened up a little more than I would like. So what do I have for this Emperor? When I first was looking at it, I had it down as experience. But as I began to do more and more readings for people, what I found was this is where the doubts come in. This is where you question all that feeling that you had. That's where you even question yourself. You become cynical. People say things to you and you go, and I just had a conversation last night with somebody actually, and they said something, and all my little doubts, not about me, but about a situation this person was in. And then I went, that's not supporting her in this, you know? And so I changed what the words I was going to say that I was saying in my head. I changed them to be supportive, because it was her experience. And who was I to say, oh, be careful of this, I don't like about that. That was when my experiences many, many years ago has nothing to do with her in the present. And that fall, you might say fall, that I did was really my doubt from what I had experienced. So I became a little doubtful about some of the information I was hearing. And that is the Emperor. And I'm sure you've got friends or family when you go to share something and you're all excited and they come back with all the naysaying, right? That's not going to work. Well, and you'll find out in their experience it didn't work. Doesn't mean it won't work for you. So it's really important here, because we're going to use that little word action again, to have the action and not get stuck. And one of the things that happens in spirituality is that you have that born again experience, we'll say, where you feel the euphoria of being in love, in the love feeling, in the love essence. Now, we will find as we move a little further, very often it's not something that maintains forever. You have to work at it. You have to keep going. So what will happen, something will happen and you lose the feeling, so you begin to doubt it, that it was ever there. Did I ever have that? And when you have it over and over and over again, you know, well, yes, it is there, and you know where to go to get it when you need it. So one of these elements of this love that you can feel inside is knowing that we can let that go. And in situations in life, when that Emperor comes up, often there's several other symbols again that will support that. And you go, okay, they've got stuck. They're doubting, they're questioning, they're not trusting. So that's and then we look for symbols that may have that. But anyway, what the journey says at that point The next symbol, number 5, is the Hierophant. Now, he's the outward visible sign of the spiritual teacher. He's the Hierophant, because they couldn't use the word Pope because it was created in England, and of course England had separated itself from the Catholic Church at that point. So there is some Christian symbology in the pictures of the Rider-Waite deck. And so the Pope is very much like that. He's got down the front of his vestment, he's got 3 X's, he's got X's on his shoes, he's got a crown of 3 levels. Now he's got a couple of things, hang on, and we're going to come back to this as we progress on through the weeks, because this is not just one day, I'm going to do this over several weeks. On the top of his crown, right up here, there's a W. That W will show up in a number of the symbols, and it's about the union between the spiritual and the material. And so the Hierophant, the spiritual teacher, again, 2 pillars, has 2 people in front of him, one dressed in a robe with roses, one dressed with lilies. Now, isn't that familiar? We saw that from the magician. But there's around the backs of these robes, there's like a yellow Y. It looks like a Y. And I meditated on that for some time. Like, why are these big yolks here? What? And that's what it is. Like, well, that's why I said yoke. It slipped out subliminally. It's like the yoke. When you go to learn, and I didn't mention, in front of, it's because I don't have the symbols in front of me, I'm coming off my head. There's crosses, 2 keys. Originally, they were silver and gold, conscious and subconscious. And the Hierophant's job is to teach you about those. And the prelates, or the people who are learning from him. They're learning the responsibility of what they're learning. There's a responsibility that goes with knowledge. Again, not always utilized, which is sometimes people kind of veer off and maybe use it not to the best advantage of things. But it's like we have that yoke of responsibility of learning. And so the whole learning phase that goes, and again, it's another commitment. How are you committing to this? How are you committing to the learning of what the teacher is teaching you? Because that's all his job is. And your job is to assume the responsibility of what's learning. Now, what is he teaching you is in number 6, the lovers. I find when you recognize that this lover, the lover symbol is is who we are. It takes on a whole different look. A naked man stands in front of a tree of life, what they call the tree of life, looks at a woman who stands naked in front of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Oh yeah, and there's even a snake in the tree with the apples and all that. Now, where is she looking? She is looking, if you ever get a line and look at the line of it, because standing between these 2, here's we're going to the 2 pillars almost, it clouds. And there is this quite high little mountains. Now, above the clouds, there's an angel. Arms outstretched, purple across. The woman is not looking at the angel. She's looking at the clouds. She thinks she's looking at the angel. But if you ever look, she's just looking up. She's like mesmerized. Now, what the Hierophant is teaching, oh so subtly, the conscious mind must go through the subconscious mind to the superconscious and not get caught up in the mental cloudiness that goes on in the mental. Now, that was me for a long time because I was trying to figure everything out. I wanted to know, hey, at that time I had 2 little kids. Pretty soon I had 2 little kids. I was working, on and on. At the same time, I'm trying to begin to sort this out a little bit for myself as well. So it's like, and that's why I gave this key confusion and indecision, because the majority of us get caught up in the clouds and we don't stay in them. And also, I was also beginning to do a lot of meditation. And as the years go by, didn't all happen in a small period. It happened over maybe 10, 15 years. For a few years, I didn't do too much. So I went from 2030, I started working, reading and teaching. But I began to teach also psychic development, meditation. And what I found was we need to not get caught up in, we need to use our minds, but not get caught up in our minds, not to let the confusion get in there. And so often that happens, and the illusion we have, our minds are wonderfully creative and we need them. Man, do we need them. They need to be in balance. And when they're not in balance, things can go really crazy in your life. And so it's really about pulling that balance together to make sure that you're not confused and you're not all over the place. So that whole consciousness, looking at the subconscious to get to the superconscious, to have an alignment and to be aware how we can get confused because our minds get in there and the buts, whatever's, however's, maybe this, maybe that, that can really, if we let that happen, then we can get, our lives can become pretty distorted, we'll say. So that's what the Hierophant's teaching you. He's teaching you about who you are, that you have a great mind, that you have this subconscious, and as you, people who have, I'm not a hypnotherapist, and I never pretend to be, but I've done loads of past life regressions. I've done readings for many years. I've done other studies. Subconscious remembers everything. So where do you go to get that information is really important, but you can't get lost in there. It's a power tool to propel you to go upward, to allow the energy to come in from above. Now, when you have learned that, which may be, we don't know the time it takes. Some people come in with that knowledge already. They just need to be reminded. It could take years. For me, it took years. It took years. And then you come to the seventh, the Chariot. Now, what I love about the symbology of the Chariot, the town is behind him. It's a hymn. Again, hey, it was made in it was published in 1910. So we're really looking at the end of the 1800s. And but the energy, the information is still prevalent today. He's got shields. He's got his armor on. He's got faces of Janus on his shoulders. Look, so we can see all around. He's in a chariot with a canopy, starry canopy, so the heavens are there. He's got two oxen, one black, one white, same as the temple from the High Priestess there. But they're lying down, they're not moving. Again, no action. He's sitting there. Now, let's go to him because this is really important. He's got a crown with a star in it, and some other ones, but it's got a star, and star shines on its own light. So he's found his light. He has emblazoned on his chest a square. His knowledge, his base of his knowledge is created. He has that, you could say, to stand. And he's willing to leave behind the past and move forward with the new knowledge that he has now. Because that's what this shows. He has knowledge. But he hasn't moved yet. And if you were to put all these symbols out, there's no movement in the symbols. They're all stationary. You have to make those steps. It does not automatically go into the next symbol. You have to make that choice all the way along in the seven. And that's why I call these first seven symbols is learning about the material world and the need to have your material world understood. Have it in hand. Quite often people, when we start spiritual study, we kind of leave behind the material world, but we live in the material world. You got to eat, you got to pay your bills, you got to, and you allow that philosophy to come through to help you with that. You get connected with the source to help you be that. And so within all that, it really brings a greater understanding. And so that's where we're going to leave today, ready to set out So next Wednesday, guess what? Hopefully you'll get through all the next 7, where we're moving out and all what that brings, because that is where a lot of things begin to start moving. But I quite often, for people in readings, I see it, but also just to go back, and when I'm teaching it, I love it, because it really is a good reminder of the beginning stages. And life is not a straight line, by the way. We will find that it's like a spiral. We go through these stages over and over in little different ways and a little different vibration. So I want to thank you for joining me. Whether some people here are live, some people will be seeing this on YouTube. I want to thank you. If you subscribe, I really appreciate that. Thank you. Or you can contact me through my website, www.normacowie.com. Thank you. Have a great and wonderful day. And we will see you next week. Bye now.